Hello, hello, hello. It's Tuesday, and welcome to a really important episode of Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan. And yes, I'm Dr. Dina McMillan, and this is a show everyone needs to watch and pay attention to, regardless of your politics, your age, your demographics, or the location where you live. This is something impacting all of us. So I want you to join me and see this really key information. Now, I have promised you no more boring Tuesdays, and that this is all part of that. Every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I am here with you live, and you can join me on X, on my X feed, on Naomi Wolf's X feed, on Rumble, Daily Clout, Facebook, the Daily Clout page, and on Getter. Or if you want to show the episode to someone else, or you want to watch it again, you can actually watch the recorded version of all episodes on my X feed, on Rumble, on Daily Cloud, and on YouTube. So please pay attention. This is information you will not find anywhere else. Now, why do I say that? Because other people who are offering insights have really interesting backgrounds, and I watch them too. I'm not saying only watch this, because I watch them too. Some of them are former Secret Service personnel, security personnel, philosophers, authors, cardiologists, a wide range of fields. But as far as I know, I'm the only social psychologist doing this. And why is that important? Because social psychology is a relatively small field still, where we study the brain and how we learn, how we are persuaded, how we're influenced, how we're manipulated and coerced, how people are indoctrinated, and how they're brainwashed. And we don't just study what happens organically. Social psychology at universities involves experimentation, where they will do research to figure out how to change people's beliefs and behaviors, usually without alerting them to the fact that someone else actually changed their minds. So these people will walk away saying, I made that choice because, and they'll rationalize all the reasons they made a certain decision, not recognizing that they were walked along and fed really compelling information, and tools and tricks were used to get someone to change their minds. Now, if that scares you, if that makes you uncomfortable, good. It's why I am really determined to get this information out to the public. Most people in the world do not understand how easily we all are influenced by people in the know. And in fact, one of the things you'll hear me say if you watch this show is that I have to be just as careful as everyone else, people without the degrees in this field, because a lot of the tactics, most of the tactics, work on the parts of the brain that are not the intellectual, language-based, problem-solving parts of the brain. They actually bypass those and go to the parts of the brain that trigger feelings and primal drives like anger and lust. Those parts of the brain have no filter. So people like me have to be just as careful. So I hope you will join me. And speaking of being careful, please get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. Nothing has changed since 2020, really. There hasn't been one person behind the whole COVID fiasco who's gone to jail. Nobody's been held accountable for what they did to us all. Hugest transfer of wealth in goodness knows, perhaps in history, based on them shutting down all of our societies and blaming it on a seasonal flu. They told us terrible things about it. They used social control to scare people into thinking if you got COVID, you were going to die. They did awful things to us. And they had actually done studies on the vaccine that they were forcing us to take before and after they offered it. And they wanted to keep that quiet for 75 years, the results of those studies of their own vaccines. The court said no. So Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, a whole slew of experts went in, grabbed those papers, and then translated that into just regular language so that you can understand what was done and the dangers of the COVID vaccine. You'd understand why it wasn't an exaggeration when people said, this is toxic. We need to really be informed on what was done to us, and we need to be prepared in case they try it again. Please get your own copy of the Pfizer papers, because you also want to support Daily Cloud and their historic work to get information out to the public that no one else is sharing. Now, speaking of not sharing, I have to admit something. Okay, so are you ready? I'm admitting something. Have you heard the saying, we teach best what we most need to learn? I started to notice that after looking at social media for an hour with all of these events happening, that my mood was starting to change, that I was becoming kind of down. I was becoming less hopeful about the future. So I did some research, and what I found was important enough. I felt I needed to share it with everyone else, not my own experience, but what studies have found about viral content, those things we keep seeing over and over and over again. People keep reposting clips over and over and over and over again, and it actually has an impact on our brain. Now, just a little shorthand about what this all means. Just keep in mind, when it comes to the brain, everything counts. Everything counts. So we're going to talk about today about what viral content can do to your mind and to your mental health. And as always on this show, we are also going to talk about what you can do to remedy the situation. We never talk about problems without also talking about solutions. So let's get started and see what's going on. Did you realize every major financial collapse has been preceded by the same 7 warning signs? Before the Great Depression, before the 1970s stagflation, before the crash of 2008. Now all 7 are flashing red again for the first time in over 15 years. American Alternative Assets just released a free report called the Bellwether Signal. It breaks down each of these signals and shows how to protect your retirement before the next wave hits. In times of uncertainty, gold has always been the ultimate safe haven. It held strong in 2008. It surged during the inflation crisis of the 1970s, and it remains one of the few assets not tied to political manipulation or central bank policy. Find out why central banks are buying it in record amounts, and now you can too. Call 855-803-GOLD or visit cloutgold.com to get your free copy of the Bellwether Signal. That's 855-803-GOLD or go to cloutgold.com. Learn the signs, protect your savings, make your move while you still can. Now, as we go through this, I just want to start this off. First of all, I see we have people that are watching the live feed, and great, thank you all. I also wanted to remind you again, if you aren't able to make it live, I made the show on Tuesday because most of us don't have a lot going on Tuesday evenings. If you aren't able to make it on Tuesday, you can always watch the recorded versions of the show if you go on Rumble, Daily Clout, YouTube, or even go on my X feed at Dr. Dina 1, where I post the episodes. Now, if you are watching it live, can you do me a favor? Sign in where you are. And that way you can leave me a comment or you can ask a question and I can answer it right away. You don't have to wait. So let's look at this. Oh, and by the way, before we start, one of the things I wanted to say that I think is very important. It is important that you do not see this as a sign that you should stay off social media. If you want to get the news of the day, you have to go on sites like X, which is the only site which is not censored, filtered, or controlled by big business, especially big pharma. We have to go online if we're going to know what's happening in the world. But what does that content do to you? What does the reposting the same videos over and over and over again, the same information over and over and over again, what does it do to our minds? What does it do to our mental health? That's what we are talking about today. Now, when content goes viral, it arouses powerful emotions in us. We feel moral outrage. We feel shock. Perhaps we feel empathy when we see something terrible, like what happened to Irina in North Carolina. We feel empathy for people who are struggling, like when we have natural disasters and we see people whose homes have been swept away. We may feel compassion or even joy, depending on what we're seeing. It will also sometimes and often trigger primal drives. Now, if you're new to the show, I've told you before, the brain processes things. It has a lot of crossover, but it processes things in different areas. When I say primal drives, I'm talking about things from the hypothalamus. I'm talking about that primal brain that works even in when the higher brain is distracted. It's what alerts you to danger. It makes you feel fear, anger, lust, hunger. That part of the brain can also be triggered by what you see in viral content on your computer, on your device. And also when you see something with the same type of opinions written over and over and over and over and over again, which is what happens often on any of these, on Blue Sky, on X, on Facebook, it can give you an intense sense of validation of your beliefs. Because of course, most of us tend to follow people who think like we do. So you see the same events and the same opinions on it repeatedly. And boy, that has a huge impact on our brains. Material that causes a strong reaction always wins out against evidence-based, nuanced information. So if somebody just puts, it's why when I do seminars and workshops, I don't just rely on screens with bullet point lists. Anything on the screen is probably a vivid imagery. I do everything to get people to move, to, when we talk about the brain, I have people touch different parts of their heads. We move around the room, we interact with each other. All of that is much more powerful in embedding that information into your brain than just someone calmly standing in front of you and in a monotone reading a list of things and telling you, this is what is going on today. We are going to be doing this, and this is the first thing we're going to. That doesn't have anywhere near the impact of this other information. The brain, your brain, my brain is wired to prioritize threat and affiliation. So anything that encourages strong group membership and anything that communicates a threat is going to get an alarm in your brain. Your brain's going to wake up, pay attention. It's going to think about it later. It's going to make it highlighted and underlined in your mind. Everything that says this is dangerous, pay attention, or people like you or people like us should respond to this is going to be very powerful in the mind. And it doesn't matter who you are. And this is not something that you have to give permission for your mind to do. This is something we are hardwired to do. So that's why this episode is so important. Now, here's another issue. Social media algorithms reward engagement, not accuracy. Some of the people on the left are actually paid to say things they don't even believe, just the most extremist things they can think of to get the other side so angry that they will not only respond to that post, they will repost it and say, look what this person said. And every time that happens, that person they get advertising money. They may even get directly paid, because X, for instance, actually pays you if you get engagement online above a certain level. So sometimes that's why you often see anything provocative being reposted again and again and again and again. It's not that that's the only thing that person has to talk about. It's that they know if it arouses emotions or triggers those powerful feelings like anger, threat, excitement, group membership, that most people are going to actually stop and look, and they may actually respond online, which puts money in their pockets. I don't know how you feel about that. Give me a comment. Sign in to the platform you're watching this on and give me a comment on what you think about that. Because while there's a way of saying, well, people who have really interesting content should be rewarded by having it, the system work that way, it's causing us some problems, put it that way. So again, some of the most well-paid people on social media intentionally post content that is designed to get a rise in reaction. Often they won't even believe it themselves, but they know other people are going to say, oh my goodness, and they'll stop whatever they're doing. They'll respond, they'll repost and point a finger. Look at what this person said. And half the people they reposted to will repost it again. And that person just watches their bank account go up and up and up. Another issue. Have you thought about this? Emotions are contagious. You've noticed this even in a room. It's one of the reasons when we've talked about emotion, I've discussed not having the gloomy Gus's around or the sky is falling type people. Having negative people, we could do a whole show just on the powerful impact of negative people on a work team, as a boss, as a partner, as a friend, in a parent group. Negative people just radiate negativity, and that what they radiate is actually contagious. You actually pick it up. It's as bad as the mold we showed last week, where we showed a moldy lemon next to a healthy lemon, and soon that mold starts to make its way over. They've done studies and found that productivity, for instance, you have one negative people in a work group, productivity goes down by 27% on average, sometimes even worse, just because they're always naysaying everything. But here's the interesting thing. Most people don't realize that emotions are contagious online as well. Even through a screen, our emotions are contagious. So when we repeatedly consume content that's saturated with rage and despair and panic or humiliation, our nervous system responds as if the threat is immediate, personal, and in person. So it responds, it sees the screen. This is an easy way to think of it. Your device screen is part of your environment. And when you feel threatened by something you see on the screen, especially if it's repeated, or especially if it arouses strong feelings in you, your nervous system is going to think that you are under threat in person right now in your body. It won't say, I've heard people say about shows when I talked about the power of storytelling and how important it is to really be careful what you watch, what you read, because your brain doesn't know what fiction is. It doesn't know what TV is. If you're watching it and you're feeling something, your brain thinks it's in the room with you, and it will cause a reaction. I know I wanted to go to Norway from watching a bunch of Norwegian shows. I had never desired to go to Norway before. I started watching really good murder mysteries from Norway. And I was like, oh, I have to go to Norway. So when I got the opportunity to do a workshop at the European Conference on Domestic Violence, I jumped at it. Now, that's a relatively harmless example, but you can think of a lot of examples where you wanted something, feared something, looked out for something based on what you saw on your screen. Even if the situation is distant, distorted, or even entirely manufactured. How many people on the left do you know who keep listing the Russia hoax as real, keep calling the January 6th, 2021 event an insurrection? There's no way that was an insurrection. It was entirely manufactured from soup to nuts as an insurrection. But they don't read the disputing information, and they felt something strongly. They felt fear when it happened. So for them, it's cemented in their mind as real. And it's not just left-wing people. We are all vulnerable to this. We have to be very careful about what we let in our heads, because this isn't about weakness. It's neurobiology. It is beyond our conscious control. There are parts of my brain that are very well educated, but they reside right in the front of my head. All the rest of my brain, nah. It's just as vulnerable to propaganda, to manipulation, to coercion as anybody else's brain. I have mentioned to you before, if you've watched the show before, that the first thing they told us when I got to graduate school was knowledge of a phenomenon does not make you immune to its effects. And I was like, well, why am I going through all this trouble to learn this stuff? Because the knowledge is the first step, and then you follow it with action to shield yourself. And that's, of course, is what we're going to talk about here. Over time, being exposed to all this negativity, and the world is coming to the end data constantly, because it's not just, again, not bullet points. We're talking about commentators, storytelling. We're talking about people posting videos, even if they're accurate, even if the video is something that's truly going on. Extensive exposure to this is going to cause emotional dysregulation. And we've talked about that. Difficulty controlling your mood and controlling your behavior. Hypervigilance. So you're going to walk around somewhat scared, or at least wary all the time. You're going to have reduced tolerance for ambiguity. So every time you see a situation, because you're going to tend to jump to something threatening, you're going to say, you want to identify everything around you, every person you come across, want to know where they stand. I've seen this with a lot. This has actually been manufactured and emphasized by our current left-wing political system. So I have found, when I first started working in domestic violence and social psychology, people wouldn't necessarily want to know what your politics were. We talked about the science, and we talked about how to help people. And I still do that. But I've noticed that people on the left quickly want to identify, are you one of us or not? Reduced tolerance for ambiguity. You're either with us or against us. This is how people are starting to feel. And it works into the next one, the heightened us versus them mindset. We're getting really bad about that. And it does no one any good. It causes divisiveness. It causes people to be fractured. I've told you, I have siblings who won't speak to me because of my political and cultural views, because politics isn't just politics. The politics are based on what you think is right and wrong. And everything I've learned in social psychology and since then shows the danger and risk of the left progressive movement and what they advocate. And it's a shame because a lot of it sounds great. Everybody joining hands, singing kumbaya, everybody getting along. What science shows is that all cultures are not compatible. All lifestyles are not healthy. All ways of raising children doesn't have the same likelihood of them growing up to be healthy, happy adults. Life is not fair. There we have it. Now, here's what happens. That viral content that we all keep watching, it trains the nervous system to stay on edge. Now, it almost makes you feel like you're in a war zone where you have to be careful all the time. I read a lot, and I lived first in Germany and then in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn when I was a teenager. And I've developed a total fascination for the Second World War. It was like, why did these people hate each other? Why did the Germans hate the Jews? What's going on here? And looking at what happened during the Second World War, just the level of fear that people had to live with every single day was astounding. There's no way that doesn't have terrible impacts on all of us to be so afraid all the time. Now, I'm not saying don't be afraid, because we are under threat. I won't lie to you, we are. But we have to be careful, because without our mental health, we won't be strong enough to handle what's coming. And research is showing right now, 1 in 5 adults in the US say they suffer from anxiety or depression. And I would say that the statistics would be similar in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, although a lot of the men might not admit that they're feeling anxiety or depression because they have a different culture. But 1 in 5 is too many. So you have to ask yourself, what if your daily scroll, what if all the time you spend on your device is eroding your empathy and widening the divides between us? Chronic exposure can narrow your perspectives, strain relationships. I've seen that in real life with my sisters refusing to talk to me, refusing to allow my sisters with children don't allow me to have contact with their children, all because I don't share woke beliefs. Now, I teach programs on how to have good relationships with people who don't share your values. So I'm not going to try to convert anybody, but their belief system says if somebody doesn't believe everything that our side says is right and true, you have to completely reject them. And they say it explicitly. But chronic exposure to all that viral content with all the negativity and the attacks and the violence, it can strain your relationships and boost depression. So 77% of heavy users report higher anxiety from the negative feeds. Now, we're going to talk about, please understand, stay with us, because we are going to talk about what you can do about this. I am not saying, oh, isn't that terrible? Look over there. No, I'm showing you what the problem is so we can talk about how to address it. But another psychological hook that people use is performative morality, otherwise known as virtue signaling. Okay? Sharing, reposting, or reacting creates the feeling you're doing something meaningful that doesn't require any real reflection. It doesn't really require action. And of course, it doesn't require accountability, because if you get community noted on X, or if people respond to it badly on another social media feed, you can always reject them. Or like what I had to do after I posted, when we did the episode honoring Charlie Kirk and his contributions, because I said, oh, Charlie Kirk, what is this guy saying? And I started to actually listen to what he was saying. And those claims about him being racist, sexist, all of that, no. Anybody that said that didn't actually listen to the whole sentence. People just edited out the parts they wanted to use to make their point. So I felt he was doing an amazing thing, bringing facts and knowledge to people who'd been indoctrinated, and they killed him for it. I did a show honoring him, And I had one of my siblings go on Facebook and try to convince everybody from high school, people I've known since childhood, who said, hey, we want to watch the show, tried to convince them not to watch the show, talked about he was sexist, racist, misogynist, just a list of things they call everyone they don't like, like the little book, Everybody I Don't Like is Hitler. I actually had to block her from my social media feed. And that's a shame. But that's what happens when you have these virtue signalers. They just pick up the labels and they have no knowledge. One of the things a lot of the independent journalists are doing is asking these people who are protesting, what do you believe in? Why are you protesting? And very few can answer. And when they can't answer, they start calling names or getting violent. What happens with virtue signaling is people feel like they're doing something meaningful, but there's no real accountability for what you post. Virtue signaling is powerful and dangerous. And in case you can't see the writing on the sign, she has a sign and it has it on a storyboard saying, I am a good person. That's what virtue signaling is about. You go and tell people, some of the biggest virtue signalers that I grew up with, they are the ones that put the black post on during the BLM riots. They put on Instagram, they had the black thing and, rah, and cheer for all the Black Lives Matter stuff and anti-racism things. These people live in elite neighborhoods with only white people living near them. They don't live near any refugees. They don't live, everything they advocate for, they don't live near or have to deal with the consequences of. Virtue signaling is a problem. It replaces being able to just echo the latest soundbite, the latest slogan is dangerous because it replaces actually thinking about what this is. And of course, we're going to talk about this. In order to really think about it, you have to actually have enough knowledge about what the issue is. And one of the ways you can broaden that understanding is listening to people who don't like it. What are they saying about it? Is what they're saying true? So you signal instead of trying to think and understand. You have no discernment. So anything your group says is great, you say is great. So we have a lot of people advocating to protect pedophiles, rapists, criminals, murderers, because their group says we need to protect these people. No discernment at all. Their alignment with their group is more important than having any kind of judgment. And no assessment. It's just about tribal loyalty. Anything my group says, I'm with it. And I've actually seen, I'm sure you have too, I've seen studies that found that people that consider themselves independent or conservative have a much broader range of beliefs than the people on the left because they don't allow thinking. Oh, Roscoe. Hello, how are you? Roscoe is here. Roscoe is one of my regulars. It is good to have you here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This topic today, I have to say, as I said, I started to notice myself, I'm waking up in the middle of the night thinking about this stuff. Many people totally feel emotionally exhausted. I don't know about you, but since this year started, because again, remember when they had the terrorist event in Sydney, it happened in my old neighborhood. Okay, when they had a year ago, when they had the Pacific Palisades, that was the neighborhood next to mine. It's where my daughter went to school. So a lot, having moved around, having friends of different places, a lot of the stuff that's happening in the world isn't just those people over there. It's like, it hits me hard. And I become emotionally exhausted. Are any of you emotionally exhausted by all of this? And strangely unfulfilled. I feel so helpless. Outrage is no substitute for purpose. So one of the things I have done, because I have been married to a politician, because I have an understanding of politics, I put my hand up. Let's see if anybody contacts me. Let's see if Dr. Dina gets an opportunity to run for office. I have said somebody needs to pick me up and run me for office because I am not the kind of person who thinks outrage is a substitute for purpose. We need to fix this stuff. And here's something, pay attention. Repeated exposure to graphic, humiliating, viral content can produce secondary trauma. Oh, here's something that Roscoe says. I saw one homeless Black man, otherwise in an otherwise affluent white liberal area. A few guys jogging on by with BLM shirts. Anyway, I don't think any one of these white BLM people gave the homeless Black guy any petty cash, but they were sure to buy their BLM t-shirts. Oh yeah, they were virtue signaling. Oh, we've got to be so much more careful, but also we have to be careful about what we're looking at online. And here's the quandary. If you don't watch, I was talking to a friend a few days ago. This friend is really bright. He's one of my closest friends. He's in Australia. And I told him he has to sign up for X because the media in Australia is completely captured. You do not find out real news. You get a very, very slanted view of what's important in the news in Australia by all the news sources because they're all owned by the same person. I told him, how can you? I can't count the number of times I've actually had a conversation with him about world events, and he had no idea. He reads all the finance newspapers. I said, why are you okay with secondary information? You need to get information yourself. So I have to look at X because otherwise I don't know what's going on in the world. I cannot find real news on mainstream media. But like you, we have to be careful about, well, we'll talk about it, how much we consume, what we consume. I've started following people that upload feel-good things where people who look very different go out of their way to help each other. I need to let that come in too. Because look at this again, repeated exposure to graphic, humiliating, or panic-inducing viral content can produce secondary trauma. Secondary trauma causes emotional numbing, intrusive thoughts, anxiety spikes, where all of a sudden it comes to mind and you notice your heart rate goes faster, your stomach clenches, sleep disturbance, and growing conviction that the world is unsafe and cruel. None of this requires personal involvement in the event being shared. You can experience, remember again, a device is part of your environment, whether it's the television, whether it's your PC, like what I'm recording on now, whether it's your tablet, whether it's your phone. Your brain sees that as something real in your environment that's giving you messages and telling you important information. So if you're constantly watching really negative things, you're going to experience secondary trauma, even if none of it touches you, even if it's not even in your state. Right now, all of us are probably feeling a lot of secondary trauma from all of that's going on in Minnesota. Now, here again, I'm a little bit different because the sister that causes me so much trouble, the one I had to block, she lives in Minnesota. And I've gone to visit her there. It would be a lot easier if it were a state I hadn't been to, like North Dakota. But we keep watching all of this stuff. We see people that we admire going up there to talk. We see things happening to people being pulled out of cars. It's really happening, and it has an impact on us. And we have to be careful. Because our nervous system, my nervous system and your nervous system, do not distinguish between lived trauma and repeated proxy exposure. Roscoe made a comment here, and this is interesting. For anybody else, all you have to do is sign on where you're watching live, and you can actually leave some comments as well. Roscoe said, I had an epiphany that watching news drains me. It gets reactions out of me. Energy that could be spent elsewhere in my actual sphere of influence instead goes to strong opinions on something way outside of it. Now, in one way, it's important that we know what's going on in the world because you'll notice that the macro and micro reflect each other. So, what's happening in Minnesota is being picked up by everybody with a device. And we're going to see the same sort of behavior depending on how the government responds to those people who are being violent, who are raiding churches. We're going to see a repeat of that in other states. It's not just emotion that's contagious, it's behaviors. I may have mentioned before that I was in Australia, in Melbourne, during the COVID fiasco. And do you remember the toilet paper run where everybody was buying up all the toilet paper? That started because something happened in China and they had a problem with getting toilet paper. Now, the cities in Australia have huge Chinese populations. So somebody was took a recording of a Chinese couple with their what they call a trolley, with their cart, the hand cart you use at the grocery store, filled with toilet paper. And then somebody else picked that up, said, hey, that's getting attention, let me do it too. They showed another Chinese person doing that. And somebody got it in their head, there's a shortage of toilet paper. So all across Australia, people are thinking, we're going to run out of toilet paper. So people just started hoarding toilet paper. And of course, social media, they're putting it on social media. People are fighting over toilet paper. So it spreads to the States, it spreads to the UK, and there was no shortage on toilet paper. Our brain picks things up, whether it's happening in a way where we can smell it, touch it, taste it, or if it's on that device. That device, we get embedded in that device very deeply. And you'll notice I used a picture with virtual reality. That's going to make things even more intensive. Have you ever asked yourself, why is that scary conspiracy video? Why am I waking up thinking about it? Why does that angry rant? Why do people keep fighting over the same things over and over again? Debate after debate. Not all emotions spread equally. Fear dominates. Okay, unfortunately, the way our brain works, negativity is more likely to embed deeply and spread quickly than positivity. So you have to really put an effort in to make the positivity spread. Because the first job of our brain is to keep us safe, fear will dominate. If something happens we see videos that are making us afraid, it's going to really resonate with our minds, with our nervous system, and when anything that goes in your nervous system goes to the vagus nerve, goes into your gut. So you might start having stomach aches. I know that when you feel something, you feel it. That gut feeling is real, It is not fake. Anger amplifies, it spreads like fire from one person to the next, and disgust lingers, and it can shape long-term behaviors. It is, please, if you only take one thing from this session today, there are reasons why emotional safety online is not a luxury. We have to start being more careful. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I decided to do this topic because I noticed a lot of the effects happening to me. And I said, if it's happening to me, it must be happening to other people. And I decided to do this show. It is a mental health necessity that we pay attention and protect our mental health while we're getting informed, while we're sharing information with each other, while we're dealing with a world that is increasingly online. And as I said, you know me, I am not just about talking about the problems. Let's talk about some ways that we can reclaim personal agency, protect our mental health. Let's talk solutions, okay? Are you ready? First, please stop pretending that scrolling is harmless. I did an earlier episode. If you go to Rumble or to YouTube or to Daily Cloud, you'll find an earlier episode that I did on addiction to your devices. And I know for myself, because I'm moving around, I'm going places, I'm often in places where I don't know anybody. I am really dependent. And because the mainstream news does not tell me anything of what's really going on in the world, I tend to check my devices fairly often. And I've actually had to force myself to stop. So here's one thing I got from Eckhart Tolle, and it's really helped me. Scrolling all the time is not harmless. While you're walking around outside, while you're on the bus, while you're in the car, pay attention to where you are. Stay off of your device. Give your brain a break. Pay attention to what's going on around you. And if there's a lot of negativity in the news, then purposely look for positive things in your environment. Just start your day counting your blessings. Frank Brescia says scrolling is not harmless, it's a drug. You're always searching for more. Because I think a lot of it has to do too, that we feel like, because this is one of the big subtle betrayals of the mainstream media being paid off by corporate interests and pharmaceutical industry, that we now know we can't find out what's going on in the world by watching the news. So we can't say, okay, when I get home, I'll watch the news like people used to do. There used to be an hour a day. They used to watch the news and that was it. Maybe they read the paper in the morning. But during the day, they interacted with their lives. We have so many things impacting us, and we can't go to the mainstream media to find out what it is. I know that when the terrorist event recently happened in Sydney on Bondi Beach, it was reported on X about 8 hours before it was picked up by Australian media. And that's pretty normal. Sometimes it's as many as 20 hours before something major happens. When Charlie Kirk was shot, when Donald Trump was shot, I found out at least 8 hours earlier by scrolling through X than I would have if I would have waited for the news to pick it up. And the news will often put, when terrorist events happen, they were like, car plows through people. Really? So this car just decided on its own. People got shot on the beach. Really? No, it was a blatant, vicious terrorist attack, the biggest Australia's ever had. That's not how it was reported by Australian media. But that's what I found out by looking on X. So it's really hard. But it's not harmless. Again, when you're going about your day, I've run into people on the sidewalk as I walk around because they're on their phone while they walk. Don't do that. It really is helpful as you go through your day. If you take public transport, don't look at your phone while you're on public transport. Don't walk around with your earbuds in. Actually listen to where you are. Pay attention to where you are. And for women, being out in public, especially at night, with anything that cuts off your hearing is not smart at all. So no, we have to be smarter than that. Here's another thing. Emotional safety requires intentional boundaries, including evaluating what you consume, limiting exposure to high arousal content, and limiting time on social media and news sites. I've actually had to start limiting myself to how often I actually look at social media because it is impacting my mood, my expectations. And often when things impact you, you sometimes are the last person to know. What I was talking, Frank mentioned something when I was talking about not having earbuds in, so you're listening to music all the time, not looking at your phone all the time. he's talking about something. He said, you also lose situational awareness. That's what that is. When you are actually paying attention to where you are and what's going on, that's situational awareness. And it's key to remaining safe, but it's also a key to your mental health. You become easy prey to evil people. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So, but it also, even without the fearful thing, this is about how you retain mental health or regain mental health if you've been having issues. One way to do that is to have those boundaries up and say, okay, I'm not going to spend all day looking at my social media feed. And we've talked before in previous episodes, and we talked about young people, they've seen a direct link between time on Instagram and loss of self-esteem and increases in anxiety, because they have turned, first it was Facebook. Years ago, it was Facebook that did this, but the same narcissistic competition has gone into Instagram, where people present this artificial impression of their lives that they are living the ideal life. And average people look at that and feel so left behind, it can often make them feel very down on themselves. And what they're showing you is just, it's not real. You need to live where you are. Pay attention to where you are. So here's some other ways to reclaim your emotional agency, so it's not all based on what you're reading on social media. Pause. So let's start pausing before we share emotionally provocative material. I know it's tempting to say, oh my God, you need to see this. But think about it before you do, because it's going to have an impact on people. Ask yourself, is this informing me or activating me? Especially often when something happens, and I'm not talking about an event like the former president and presidential candidate getting shot. That was something that was a huge deal. Charlie Kirk getting shot was huge. I'm talking about a lot of the content we get ready to share. Sometimes the initial way it's presented is designed to be provocative. Again, remember, the people who get the most share of their material actually make money off of it. So ask yourself, is the way this material is being presented actually informing me, or are they trying to activate me to get me to share this so they can get more influence and advertising dollars and get paid on social media? Here's another way: regularly seeking a broad range of information, not only that which confirms existing beliefs. This is a little tough because the more strongly we hold beliefs, the more cognitive dissonance we experience when we come across conflicting beliefs. So going on something like Blue Sky can be a little, well, not even a little, it can be disheartening at the very least. The deceptions and the dislike and the anger and the nastiness against anybody who doesn't vote the way they do is tough. But I try to stand back from, and because not everybody is on that extreme. When I believe something, I make a conscious effort to get opinions from people who don't think like I do, because they can often tell me something that I've missed. And by actually having to even mentally defend my viewpoint, it gives me a degree of distance from whatever it is, which allows that information to go to the problem solving part of my brain and away from the primal part that's always about protecting yourself and the emotional part that's always getting upset about it. It moves it out of that into information, language, and it can keep it from overwhelming you, and it can keep it from traumatizing you. And it also, Charlie wouldn't have been as effective as he was if he weren't willing to listen to what people who had exactly opposite beliefs had to say. He had to know what they were going to tell him in order to gather the information to dispute what they believed. He had to listen to them first. And it is tough. And I say that it is tough. But again, it moves it into the problem solving part of the brain, which can give you enough emotional distance to keep it from being so harmful, so hurtful. And practice emotional regulation. Not everything that moves you deserves amplification. Try to stop with the knee-jerk reactions. If you feel something, even if you feel it strongly, try to calm down before you react to it. Because that gives you self-control and it can keep it from roll. It's almost like it just resonates in your brain and amplifies in your brain and it causes harm. You don't want that. We want to be smart and informed. And here's another thing. Let's try to flip the script sometimes. Using viral joy to build resilience. Let's also, I've started reposting things where I see people you wouldn't expect going out of their way to help each other, going out of their way to be there for each other. It brought me such joy when I read this, when I saw this, and I shared it. Let's also try to bring some joy. Let's not just focus on the negativity. Now, I'm not talking about being soft and fluffy and kumbaya, because we are warriors and we are in a war. We do have to be tough. But we also need to make it to the finish line, and we won't do that if our mental health is too much at risk. Mix it up. Put some positivity in there sometimes. I love little things with cute little puppies or animals, the little dog and the people bring a kitten home and the dog adopts the kitten. I love that kind of stuff. Put that kind of stuff up there too. Uplifting content can spread hope and motivation. It can bring joy. It can lift your mood. It can keep you from feeling like everything's falling apart. And here's another important thing. Don't let your online life replace in-person engagement. This is another thing that can happen when you feel like the sky is falling. You'll be less inclined to go out and socialize, and we can't let that happen. Social isolation is not just bad for your mental health, it's also bad for your physical health. So you want to continue to engage with people in person. And when you're dealing with people, it's like I deal with people all the time who have very different political beliefs. And when we meet in person and we talk about things that we all think are funny or cute or things we share, it reassures me that we're all still human beings. Reclaim discernment. Be very discerning. Viral does not mean it's true. Popular does not mean useful. Emotional does not mean accurate. And the most radical act you can have in today's culture isn't outrage. We're all outraged. It's composure, discernment, it's emotional sovereignty. It's also taking decisive action to remedy the situation. Every time we see a problem, let's all of us say, okay, let's identify this problem. Let's get a wide range of perspectives, even with from people who disagree with us, but let's figure out solutions and then let's consistently take action. One of the things that will help with all of this is if you take action in your life. Volunteer, even if it's just on the phone. Volunteer for somebody that's helping. I know I'm going to be politically volunteering. If somebody knows a way I can run for office, I'm more than happy to do so. I am taking action. My domestic violence programs, which I'm going to talk about in a second, healing the rift programs, all of that is taking action to make the world a better place. I'm not just talking about the problems. I'm actually providing tangible, realistic tools to fix it. And we can all do that. And here's some other advice. And I mentioned this last week, but I would say it again. One of the things you can get my book on Amazon, Brief Overview of Abusers' Strategies and Tactics. And you may look at that and think, oh, that's girly. If you're a guy, no, that's girly. If you look at the manipulation tactics that are used, similar tactics were used with just tiny variations, easily seen through when they decided to scare us all about COVID. Once you know these tactics, it gives you a superpower. So get your own copy. Look, the book is less than 60 pages and each page has graphics on it. It's designed to be read in less than an hour and it only costs $10. So go on Amazon and get your own copy, because the information that you have there will keep you aware and able to identify and deflect manipulation in your real life. So any questions or comments, I would suggest you contact me on X. Online classes coming soon. When you contact me, tell me what classes you want. If you've watched the show or you go on Rumble or Daily Cloud and you look at the topics, what do you want to know more about? I'm going to be having classes. Or if I haven't thought of it or it's not here. For instance, I'm going to be doing a class for women so that they can become more appealing to men, have stronger relationships with good men. I haven't done a show on that, but I have a book on that and we are going to talk about it. Good morning, Peter. Yeah, I'm here to learn. Yes. Well, I'm going to post a recording of this show on my X feed at Dr. Dina 1 in just a few minutes. You need me to come to do a lecture, a seminar, or workshops, any of the work that I do, go to my website, ethicalstrategic.com, and see all of the things I offer. And if you want to hire me, there's the contact info. You just take a screenshot and you can hire me. Thank you all for being here. Let's join together and just make this world a better place, but let's keep ourselves mentally strong and mentally safe while we do it. I will see you all next week. Thank you for joining me. Have a great week.